Let me call the hearing to order once again after the recess and recognize Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. LaPlante, first off, thank you for each of you being here. Dr. LaPlante, I've been here about 3 years, and my background is in business. And one thing I've watched since I've been up here is it seems like what defense does, they do a lot of research, development, but you don't get it to fruition. If we did that in business, we'd all go bankrupt. And so what do you think you can do that's going to change that, where we don't just research everything and never develop it to something that's going to help us defend the country?
Senator Scott, I appreciate the question. I believe that industry and small business and innovators have to see there's a chance they're going to get whatever they do in research into a production line. And so we have to have the metrics. If we don't get things into a production line, that we're not succeeding. That's what we have to do.
So a year from now, what are you going to come back and say, hey, I changed this process and this is why it works better now?
Yeah, two things, Senator. One would be to up the production lines of the production lines we currently have, so munitions, UASs, just get them higher production. But the second is work on all the weapon systems across the Valley of Death to make sure we're injecting technology into the systems we have. Because we have the program officers over here that have the weapon systems, we have the technologists over here. We have to make that pipeline go and make it a metric for success.
So what's a private company that you would say they know how to take something from research and development to actual use quickly that you would use as a best practices?
Well, I think SpaceX is one. SpaceX is it's a private company. They also do business with the government, but they're doing agile software development processes to get to a launch every 2 weeks on their critical launch capability. That's a speed that is just unheard of, and so it can be done. I think they have to see that. The other piece is I think that small businesses and industry have to see it that there's skin in the game, that they have a viable line of business if they're successful in innovating. They don't just get a one-off contract for a prototype. But SpaceX is an example of just rapid innovation.
So are there any standards where the private sector says we spend this much on research and development before things get to something that's going to be useful that you would be able to apply?
Well, I think what I understand the private sector does, and we saw this when we were doing the agile software study, was they do it incremental at a time. They'll do some research, come back in 90 days, 2 months, 3 months, say, what do you got for it? And if it's not paying off within 6 months, they'll stop and go to something else. But so that's something the DoD does not do generally. We've got to move to those much more agile approaches. So a lot of private business, they're simultaneously having a lot of these R&D efforts going on at the same time, but they will stop them immediately if it's not paying off.
And you think you have the ability to do that?
In software, I think we do. What I don't know about, Senator, and I'd like to find out, should I be confirmed, is if we can bring those agile approaches to more hardware-centric systems. That if we're doing the research and we're doing tests and we say, nope, we got to stop that, or do 3 at the same time and do a best-of-breed bake-off within 6 months.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Adams, do you support the modernization of U.S. nuclear deterrence, and do you have any concerns with the current modernization schedule?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I do support the current modernization efforts. I have concerns in general about our ability to meet schedule. If confirmed, I will dig into the details of that and see if there are looming problems that would cause us to not meet schedule.
Are you committed to make sure that our annual budget requests for defense programs will be sufficient to support the DoD military requirements?
Yes, Senator.
And what if they weren't? What would you do? What if you said we have to have this, and the people above you said, no, we're not going to do that. We just don't want to spend the money like that. What would you do?
Well, I would certainly have the conversation with Jill Ruby, and I've got a lot of confidence in her as far as being receptive to that message.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. LaPlante, in your opening statement and in your written testimony, You identified the need to tap into the private sector's innovation by lowering barriers to doing business with the Department of Defense, particularly for small businesses. In your view, to let the committee know, what do you believe is the proper balance between the untapped resources, such as small businesses, non-traditional commercial firms and startups, and proven defense industries that can continue to deliver world-class systems for war fighters? We have a lot of elements there. What's the proper balance?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I would look at it this way, Senator. I think, as I understand it, we want the widest amount of competition possible. We want all of those elements there. Any part of that portfolio you just described, whether it's small business, startups, or main defense contractors that are getting out of the business, is bad for us. So the real question about the balance is we want competition. We want competition not just for its own sake, but it will drive better behavior. We also have to make sure that if you're a traditional defense contractor and you're a prime, that you shouldn't get complacent. That if in fact there is a new entrant, small business or startup that can do your job, you will be competitive with them, and it's going to drive better behavior. That's the way I would look at it.
Mr. Plant, in my committee assignments, I serve as chair of Homeland Security and Government Affairs. I'm a member of the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, and of course, the member of the Armed Services Committee. So I'm frequently working on concepts that address kind of the crossroads between industry, Department of Defense, as well as general government accountability. And in many instances, these concepts all intersect in my state of Michigan. As you know, there's significant industrial capacity, and they are also continually engaging with academic institutions to research and develop new materials, new technologies, systems, all the things we need for the future warfighter. And given the significant role that Michigan plays in support of defense acquisition and sustainment, I would like to invite you to join me in Michigan to witness firsthand some of our current operations and discuss how we can meet these needs. So my question to you is, if confirmed, and after you have a few months to settle into your position, if confirmed, will you commit to visiting Michigan to see firsthand how acquisition and sustainment needs and partners in industry could be beneficial?
Senator, absolutely.
Right, thank you. Mr. Raven, Mr. Putin's unlawful and immoral invasion of Ukraine has reminded many in Washington of the enduring need for the United States to maintain and to deploy effective missile defense systems all across the globe. The Navy currently operates the Aegis Ashore site in Romania and is constructing a site in Poland. There have been some concerns within the Navy, though, that the operating of a land-based version of the Aegis system consumes some valuable personnel and funding resources that might be better spent elsewhere in the Navy. My question for you, Mr. Raven, do you believe there's a right balance between maintaining an effective naval component to missile defense while also ensuring the Navy has the resources to perform its core missions every day?
Yes, Senator. And first, let me share my thoughts for the people of Ukraine who are fighting for their democracy against this unparalleled aggression against them. In terms of those missile defense sites that you're referencing, if confirmed, I intend to work closely with the Missile Defense Agency to make sure that our allies are defended, but also go deeper and understand the resourcing requirements for those versus other Navy priorities.
Right, thank you. And also, Mr. Raven, to continue with the theme of resource constraints on the Navy in the midst of introducing a host of new platforms and technologies to the fleet. These include the Constellation-class frigates, which I would add very proudly are built by Michigan workers in the shipyard of Marionette, just across the border in Wisconsin, as well as Ford-class carriers, unmanned surface vessels, Columbia-class submarines. And since you come from an appropriations background, I know you realize, I know I realize that you have extensive experience in funding these programs. But if confirmed, how will you help ensure that the Navy is able to efficiently and effectively integrate these new platforms at an operational level?
Senator, thank you for that. In terms of the integration of new capabilities, I think the Navy is looking at a mix of both capacity and new capabilities to deliver those, what's needed by our sailors. And in terms of those new platforms, I look forward to working closely with the CNO and others to make sure that the capabilities of those exciting platforms are delivered.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Wicker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Peters has expressed a concern about the fleet, and I want to echo that in questions for both Mr. Raven and Dr. LaPlante. The most recent 30-year shipbuilding plan submitted last year calls for a Navy of between 321 and 372 ships. A December 2020 version of the plan calls between 382 and 446 ships. The Navy's most recent publicly released force structure assistance called for 355 ships. And as you know, that is the statutory requirement passed by this Congress and signed into law by the President of the United States. Yet recent testimony from the Chief of Naval Operations indicates the fleet cannot grow from its current roughly 297 ships without a larger budget. In the recently passed FY22 omnibus, Congress responded to a need shared on both sides of the aisle for a larger fleet by committing the resources necessary to move us in that direction. In a bipartisan manner, we voted for $26.7 billion to procure 13 Navy ships. This was $4.1 billion more than President Biden asked for in his request. So, Mr. Raven and Dr. LaPlante, please respond to this set of facts. What are your views on the most recent 30-year shipbuilding plan and the various analyses and requirements for the size of the Navy? What mix of ships do you believe should be emphasized, and what are your plans to fund the Navy, particularly shipbuilding? We'll start with Mr. Raven first and then go to Dr. LaPlante.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. In terms of establishing a good shipbuilding plan for the Navy, I think there's a couple elements here. First of all is, of course, as you mentioned, the 30-year shipbuilding plan. That is the signal to industry of what to expect for future years, so industry can prepare to build those ships in the most effective manner possible. And let me also add that the authorities provided by this committee to make sure that industry can operate efficiently in building those ships is a very critical tool.
Absolutely.
I would also add that the force structure assessment that is ongoing and should be released shortly is another key element of what the warfighting requirements will be. I really look forward to reviewing both that force structure assessment and the 30-year shipbuilding plan when it comes out in the very near future. And
could you be a little more specific about the very near future?
My understanding is that the Department of Defense is planning to release those. I'm afraid I can't be more specific than the near future, but I understand it will be soon.
Dr. LaPlante, what do you say to this? And will you commit to working with the Navy and the Marine Corps on their requirements and not simply letting OSD and OMB determine the requirements for the services?
Absolutely. Force levels and all the force level studies that were talked about, I will support them and do whatever I can to make sure these requirements are met. And again, thank you to the committee for giving the authorities for the ships that you just described, Senator.
And do you have any views about the question I asked Mr. Raven? What mix or types of ships and the various requirements for the size of the Navy?
Yeah, all I would say is that, I mean, obviously we need more numbers, as has been said many times. Quantity has a quality all its own. As far as the exact force structure, I'm not current on the current O plans to really be able to answer that. My bias of my background is we want survivable and we want strike, but I would really look forward, if confirmed, to see the force structure that is being offered by the Navy or recommended.
Okay, and quickly, in the recently passed 22 Omnibus, Congress responded to needs by appropriating $625 million for shipyard infrastructure optimization plan. This was $219 million above President Biden's budget. How will you work to ensure that our government depots, ammunition plants, labs, and shipyards are sustained and modernized? And can you say whether you support increased funding to these areas? Dr. LaPlante.
Yes, Senator. Thank you. I believe our infrastructure overall needs attention, whether it's the shipyards and the like, and also the workforce for the shipyards. And yes, I support increased funding. As we know, as we see in Ukraine, sustainment and readiness of the force has to be a top priority, and we have to fund these areas. That's going to continue to give a ready force for years to come.
Mr. Raven, shipyards, depots, military infrastructure.
Senator, these facilities are key to generating readiness. There's been much discussion about the shipyards, and I agree that this is a once-in-a-century bill that needs to be addressed. And I also would support looking at the other facilities that help generate not only service member readiness, but industrial readiness. So I would look forward to working with you on those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker. Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scientific studies have demonstrated that exposure to PFAS in the environment is linked to harmful health effects in both humans and animals. Due to the presence of this harmful forever chemical on DoD installations, the fiscal year 22 NDAA requires the DoD to test the groundwater of all installations by the end of 2023 for PFAS contamination. For Mr. LaPlante, if confirmed, will you commit that DoD will meet this NDAA deadline to complete groundwater testing for PFAS contamination? And do you commit to sharing the test results with nearby communities?
Yes, Senator. I appreciate the question, and I understand the toll that this issue has had on many of the local communities around our bases and the impact it's had on families. So yes, if confirmed, I'm going to be diving into this issue, finding out, again, what the survey of the problem is, making sure we're transparent with the committee and with the local communities, and we can get on with mitigation plans. It's a terribly important issue.
Excellent. Millions of service members likely drank water contaminated with PFAS for decades. If confirmed, when will DoD alert veterans and service members they may have been drinking contaminated water?
Well, I think if confirmed, we need to find out when the survey of all the facilities is done, and as soon as that's done, we should notify people immediately. I don't know sitting here what that date would be, but it can't be soon enough.
And please commit to working with me on that issue.
Absolutely.
And many local communities are frustrated by their interactions with the DoD concerning environmental hazards caused by the use of PFAS. If confirmed, how do you recommend that DoD communicate and engage with DoD communities?
Yeah, what I believe, Senator, is that if confirmed, I'm going to have to spend time and my staff doing open town halls, doing a lot of engagement with the community, doing a lot of listening, and try to treat transparent as possible. This is such an important issue on the towns surrounding our bases.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Johnson, in the civilian justice system across the country, criminal charging decisions are made by district attorneys that are experienced prosecutors. Yet, this is not the case in the military justice system, where military commanders make the decisions whether to charge service members with serious crimes. Could you explain why this is important for the military justice system to mirror civilian justice systems?
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. I am aware of the concern that Congress has had with regards to the role of the commander in the system, and that also the changes in the fiscal year 2022 NDAA has narrowed the number of crimes in which commanders are involved. To the extent that those recent changes may come under challenge, and if confirmed, I would be on the court. I would have to decide on that. As a result of that, Senator Gillibrand, under Canon 386, I cannot comment on that.
Under the UCMJ, commanders select individuals to sit on military juries. They usually select these officers and non-commissioned officers from a pool of senior individuals that they may know and supervise. Could you discuss how this type of bias affects the perception of the military justice system among civilians?
Senator, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the back end of that question, how it affects it among civilians?
No. What's the perception of the civilian world to the military in that the commander chooses the jurors based on a pool of officers and non-commissioned officers that they may know?
Well, Senator, again, because Congress has expressed concern about that, they have made changes with regards to how panels are selected and the rights of the accused with regards to expanding the pool of the selectees. Again, because they are fairly recent changes, they're likely to be challenged, or they could be challenged, and to that extent, if they bubbled up to CAF, if confirmed, I would have to rule on that. And so again, Senator, I am not free to make comments with regards to that.
In Ramos v. Louisiana, the Supreme Court recently invalidated the practice of non-unanimous juries for criminal cases. This decision, however, may not impact service members because they have been traditionally treated as a separate class and currently subjected to a 3/4 majority verdict for guilt. Without discussing any pending cases, could you describe the importance of aligning service members' Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights with those in their civilian counterparts?
Thank you, Senator. Again, constitutional rights have been affirmed. Service members do not lose their constitutional rights, their civil rights and civil liberties when they put on the uniform. The Supreme Court and CAF and its predecessor, COMA, has taken into account the uniqueness of the military context. And so some constitutional rights may not be as broad. As you noted, Senator, several years ago, Congress changed the level, the threshold for arriving at a conviction from 2/3 to 3/4. And again, we are seeing those cases bubble through the system. And so it would, again, be inappropriate for me to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Gillibrand. Let me recognize Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up with a couple of questions on PFAS, Mr. LaPlante, that were just asked by Senator Gillibrand. You know, this potentially highly dangerous chemical has already infected many, many service people. I understand that there would be a study done by DOD of the human health impacts of PFAS by the end of 2021. Has that report been completed?
Not that I'm aware of, but I could be wrong. Not that I'm aware of.
I'm going to ask that you commit to determine whether it's been completed and that you also commit to release it to the committee.
Absolutely. I commit to that, Senator.
Thank you. The President recently released an executive order that directed federal agencies to buy products made without PFAS. I'd like to know how you will comply with this executive order if confirmed, and what steps you'll take to ensure that DOD takes an enterprise-wide approach to PFAS, that is, throughout the department, as recommended by the Pentagon's Inspector General.
Yes, Senator. So to comply with that executive order, we would have to be doing, if confirmed, an inventory across the department, the enterprise level, as you said, on all the places where products like that are purchased and stop. Then, of course, we also have to have backup plans when we don't purchase the product anymore. If there still needs to be some firefighting capability, how do we come up with something that is safe and usable? And so that's what I would see as having to be done if confirmed.
Has that begun?
Pardon me, I'm sorry?
Has that enterprise-wide review been started?
Of the executive order, I'm not aware of it, but it may be. I've not been in the discussions, in the policy discussions.
There are safer alternatives, for example, to firefighting foam that don't involve PFAS, correct?
Yeah, yes, I'm aware of at least several candidates for that, and I think that would have to be accelerated to address this issue.
Will you commit to accelerate it?
Yes, absolutely.
Let me ask you on a separate topic, the CH-53K. You and Mr. Raven, I'm sure, are both familiar with the CH-53K, the most capable heavy-lift helicopter in our nation's history. It is a technological marvel. It lifts 3 times the amount of weight that the Echo does. It is far more survivable, faster, more easily maintained, and it's significantly more valuable in combat than any of its predecessors. The program has been criticized because of its acquisition timeline and because potentially it might increase the cost of acquisition. The GAO, for example, in a report last March, took issue with the integrated master schedule timeline. Let me ask both of you briefly what you would do to make sure that we move forward with that program as quickly and cost effectively as possible.
I'll take the first chance and then turn it over to my colleague here. I think the first thing that needs to be done, if it hasn't been done, is to do an independent schedule estimate. GAO has a very good references and validations for doing independent schedule estimating. So what we should do, if it hasn't been done, is do an independent schedule estimate and then see how it can be sped up, either with contract or incentives or other items.
Thank you. Mr. Raven?
Senator, I would add that the CH-53K is one of many systems that is really important to the Marine Corps and their ability to move Marines, move supplies, especially in their concept for more distributed operations. So I see a good future for this capability. If confirmed, I would go forward and review the schedule for fielding this as well as testing and make sure that Marines have the capabilities that they need to do their job.
I agree that it is an essential program for the Marines to do their job, and that's the DOD assessment. I hope that you would pursue it as well and move the program forward as expeditiously as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a point of pride, I have to say, wow, the 53 Kilo is a remarkable aircraft. I wouldn't say that it's better than the Black Hawk. So just wanted to put that out there. I'd like to start by focusing in on acquisition and sustainment. And your role is confirmed, Dr. LaPlante. I think we're at a critical moment right now and need to make sure we're learning the right lessons and capitalizing on our strengths. For example, my personal interest in the Army's future vertical lift program doesn't just come from my background flying Black Hawks or as chair of Airland, but also with a real interest and appreciation for how the Army has been investing in its next generation of vertical lift programs. I lived through the Comanche debacle as a young soldier, and it's so refreshing to see what is happening with future vertical lift. As different FVL components develop, I want to make sure that we're learning from the program's successes so that we can try to replicate those across other acquisition programs and deliver necessary capabilities to our military on time and on budget. Our acquisition and maintenance need to be able to grow more agile, more innovative, and if we can't get there quickly, we may lose the opportunity to truly maintain our overmatch against our adversaries. Our small and disadvantaged businesses are drivers of agility and innovation, and as such, they must play a larger role in our defense industrial base. Yet the barrier to entry for these businesses is too high for many of them to achieve success, and the small business industrial base has shrunk over the past decade. The Department's February report on the state of competition in the defense industrial base calls out the need to remove these barriers and increase opportunities for small businesses. In Illinois, we have one of the largest concentration of tool and die manufacturers for the aerospace industry, for example. Dr. LaPlante, what role do you see small and disadvantaged businesses playing in our defense industrial base? If confirmed, how do you plan to address the recommendations in this report and make sure that DOD is supporting small, woman-owned, and other disadvantaged businesses?
Senator, I certainly appreciate the question, and I'll just state what I think you know and this committee knows, is GAO says often 70% of the life cycle costs of a weapon system are in the sustainment. Okay, the other piece of it is we need these small business and these startups to be in our industrial base. That's the ace in the hole of the country, and the fact that the number of small businesses going down has to be reversed. Now, what are those obstacles that these reports point out? My understanding, they typically point out things like cost accounting standards, IP, intellectual property concerns, how long it takes to get on contract. Another piece of it, which maybe doesn't come up very much in public, but it should, is something called authority to operate. If you get a network, even for critical unclassified information, it may take a small business months to have the government come in and give them the authority to operate their network, even if they're making parts. So all of these things have to be driven collectively and worked collectively so small business can say they have confidence that's going to get better for them. And if confirmed, that's what I'm going to focus on.
And I do think that a strong collaboration between the department and Congress to address a lot of these hurdles is important. Would you commit to working with my office, if confirmed, to take any necessary steps to fix these issues?
Absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. Switching topics slightly, I'd like to quickly touch on the issue our defense contractors are facing in the supply chain, which we've all seen exposed through the past 2 years of the pandemic. Contractors and suppliers have lived through delays and shortages of critical components during COVID, but operating in a contested environment would present additional challenges we may not be ready for. In order to make sure our industrial base can scale to the needs during a potential conflict, the department needs to understand these choke points and plan for them in advance. Dr. LaPlante, if confirmed, what strategy would you use to identify these present and future choke points, especially for a contested logistics environment? And what are some steps you would recommend taking to mitigate these types of risks for both acquisition and sustainment?
Yes, Senator, I would say to start with, we as a country have to have more hot production lines, period. And sometimes it means redundant production lines to deal with some of these single point failures. Second is that on the good news side, there's been developments in big data analytics using open source as well as other sources of information and machine learning to actually dive into somebody's supply chain and find out critical nodes that they didn't even know they had. These are starting to come out there. Some of them are quite good. What I intend to do is find the best of breed of these, get the department to use them, and also make them available to small businesses so they understand their critical node as well as the primes.
Yeah, I think there's also an opportunity to work with the arsenals as well. Rock Island Army Arsenal, for example. It's the last vertically integrated metals manufacturing facility in the DoD, and I think they can play a role in helping keep those hot production lines.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. Senator Rosen, please.
Oh, there it is. Sorry, my mic didn't come on. Thank you, Chairman Reed, for holding this hearing, and thank you to the nominees for testifying today and for your willingness to serve. We appreciate you. I want to speak a little bit about Fallon Naval Air Station and the land withdrawal, because Nevada, we are really proud to host the Naval Air Station. It's home to Top Gun and our nation's premier carrier air wing, and it's our Navy SEAL Training Center. And so, Mr. Raven, as you know, the Navy is seeking an expansion of 600,000 acres of federal land over 65,000 acres of non-federal land. It would expand the Fallon training range complex to about 900,000 acres. This proposal would impact local counties, tribes, sportsmen, farmers, energy companies who currently access and operate on these lands. And so it's why last year I invited Secretary Del Toro and Acting Undersecretary Berger to come to Nevada and meet with local stakeholders. I'm grateful they did both travel to my state to hear firsthand how this proposed expansion would affect our local economies, recreation, wildlife, and of course cultural resources. So, Mr. Raven, as the Navy pursues modernization of the range, can you commit, if confirmed, to continuing the Navy's engagement with local, state, and tribal governments? And can you commit to working with me and the rest of the Nevada delegation to craft a consensus-based proposal that enhances our national security? We know we need to do that, but we have to address the stakeholder concerns.
Senator, yes. I had the pleasure of visiting Fallon just a few years ago and saw the outstanding capabilities there. And of course, with future weapon systems coming online in the near future, the ability of ranges are essential to making sure our service members are trained. And as you rightly point out, to make that happen requires partnerships across federal government, state government, local government, and tribal governments. And I commit to working on that with you.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned partnerships, because the Navy's legislative proposal last year, unfortunately, did not incorporate any suggested changes or feedback from local stakeholders or the Nevada delegation. So if you're confirmed, will you ensure that the Navy submits an improved legislative proposal and map which incorporates stakeholder input?
Senator, I know this is a key issue within the Department of the Navy, and if confirmed, I want to understand what happened last year and what will happen in the future, but I want to work with you on these issues. This partnership is very important.
Thank you. I want to move a little bit now to Dr. Adams, because I want to talk about the Nevada National Security Site and our infrastructure upgrades. We had an opportunity to speak over Zoom last week, and for those of you who don't know, the Nevada National Security Site oversees the Nuclear Stockpile Stewardship Program, principally at the U1A facility. It's an underground laboratory where scientists conduct subcritical experiments that verify the reliability and the effectiveness of our nuclear stockpile. U1A is undergoing major construction. It's going to soon host the most capable weapons radiographic system in the world. However, the NNSA currently faces significant infrastructure delays, including at the Nevada National Security Site. So, Dr. Adams, if confirmed, how will you address NNSA's infrastructure modernization challenges and delays, particularly when it comes to upgrades at U1A, so they don't impact the agency's ability to fulfill its mission of performing these subcritical tests?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. First, let me reaffirm the importance of that site. It's a national treasure, and the enhanced capabilities for subcritical experiments that you are referring to is absolutely vital to our ability to answer some of the pressing stockpile questions that we're going to have in the future. As far as the schedule and cost issues, I'm not privy to exactly the details of what's going on there, but if I'm confirmed, I will certainly dive into that and try to understand what's going on and mitigate any problems that are there.
Thank you. And finally, for Dr. LaPlante, the DoD innovation cycle, I'd like to ask you about the Valley of Death, where cutting-edge military technologies die before they can win a DoD contract to produce software or equipment at scale. If confirmed, what specific steps would you take to improve the transition of successful prototypes to the point of production, and then rapidly field those technologies at scale so we can leverage technology to better compete with our adversaries?
Thank you for the question, Senator. All of those prototypes that you described and those innovations, they all should have a plan of, if successful, what weapons system are they going to transition into? And then on the other side of it, the weapons system has to have a tech insertion plan to accept it. That has to be all part of it. And also production and sustainment has to be thought of at the very beginning of these innovations. Otherwise, it'll just fall into the valley of death. So that's where I'm committed to really work hard on, and also work with Ms. Heidi Hsu, who has the R&E job. We're going to be joined at the hip to get these technologies across the valley of death and get them to our warfighter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Let me thank the nominees for their excellent testimony, and we will move, I hope, very rapidly to a vote on your confirmation. Thank you for your commitment to public service, and with that, let me adjourn the hearing. Thank you.